Good morning. Thank you all. Before I start going into the sermon, I wanted to mention because it's important to know here in California, I'm sure everybody's heard that we're having a overabundance of rain, a lot of rain, whereas where we're at, we are below the snow and of course above the flooding. But we sit and we just wonder if we should reflect that all this rain is God's tears for what He's about to do, because we know we're supposed to watch and read the signs. Today's message, it's titled, "What Does Being Peculiar Mean?" And it is a Thanksgiving message. It was around the beginning of October that I had a dream. Last month, just a few weeks ago. Well, in my dream, I'm sitting under a most beautiful apple tree. I am on a slight hill looking down over a valley of many different types of apple trees. As I look up at the branches, I notice it's still early morning and that the early morning dew makes the apples glisten from the rising sun. The tree I am looking up at happens to be my favorite type of apple tree. The branches bow from the weight of the many apples. These apples are my favorite type. They are called Golden Delicious. My mind ponders how golden delicious apples have a juicy texture, yet they are firm and crunchy. I stand up, reach up to a limb bending down from the weight of all the apples. There are so many apples. As I wrap my right hand around the apple, I can feel the wet, cool surface of the apple and know it is going to be delicious. A golden delicious. I pull, and without much hesitation, the apple separates from its connection to the apple tree. The apple that once was part of the tree is now my apple. I bring the apple to my nose to smell that only a golden delicious apple has. My mind stops to enjoy that wonderful aroma, and I go, mmm. I lick my lips as I know I'm going to take a nice bite to the apple. Suddenly, I hear a voice that almost shocks me, as I thought I was alone. I look over and there is a farmer in a large brimmed hat. The farmer says, "You know, you can't eat that apple." I ask him why. He replies, "Two main reasons. The first, did you forget to thank the Creator for making a tree and allowing it to grow apples? And secondly, this is a dream." Instantly, I'm in a large white classroom. Standing in front of the room next to the whiteboard is the farmer. As I'm looking at him, the appearance of the farmer becomes the guide angel. While he speaks my heavenly name, I look down at my right hand, and it's empty. He tells me he brought me here because I am to prepare a message. He moves to stand beside the whiteboard, and as he points to it, the whiteboard becomes a curtain of water falling. The curtain of water is a flowing sheet of water, wide and flat. It immediately fills the air with a cool, clean, fresh smell. He tells me to read this carefully and have a deep understanding of what its instruction is about. He tells me that after I have reviewed it, I am to prepare a message and share it immediately. There before me, I see the following statement. As I read it many times, I immediately understand the utmost importance of it, but also have a broad sense of the imminent need to share a very large message. In the midst of the falling sheet of water, very rich, dark blue letters appear, and as I read the following passage, we'll hear it again. The controlling power of appetite will prove the ruin of thousands when, if they had conquered on this point, they would have had moral power to gain the victory over every other temptation of Satan. But those who are slaves to appetite will fail in perfecting Christian character. And as we near the close of time, Satan's temptations to indulge appetite will be more powerful and more difficult to overcome. To write down a note that is found in Counsels on Diet and Foods, page 59. Well, I woke up from this dream and immediately knew I needed to prepare a message. But I still really wanted a golden delicious apple for breakfast. So I called Clarissa and asked who she had booked to present a message for November. She told me and said she would ask him to let me give a message. So today, I am delighted to be giving a Thanksgiving message. As I read and reread several times the statement I just read, the depth of what is included in the underlying message within that statement is overwhelming. Even the basic message of simply giving thanks, and to think it was all planned for a time as this, Thanksgiving, and to think that we also need to be happy while giving thanks. Let's stop and hear that statement one more time. Again, from Counsels on Diets and Foods, page 59. This will be the third time you've heard it when we started this service. The controlling power of appetite will prove the ruin of thousands when, if they had conquered on this very point, they would have had moral power to gain the victory over every other temptation of Satan. But those who are slaves to appetite will fail in perfecting Christian character. And as we near the close of time, Satan's temptation to indulge appetite will be more powerful and more difficult to overcome. Well, today I want to talk about food. No, it's not going to be about don't eat pork and don't drink alcoholic beverages. We already know all about that. So why am I talking about food? We all know that food is important, but temperance is far more important than what most people think. Do you want to reach heaven? Do you realize that there is a close connection between your physical health and your spiritual health. We all know that when one part of the body is hurt, other parts of the body are also affected. They share similar reactions and respond in their own way. For example, if you hit your head, you'll not only get a bad headache, but you may also get nauseous and even vomit. But the brain and stomach will react. Now, hold on. Let me restate that in different words. Everyone who wants to be sanctified needs to realize that being intemperate is a sin, because the health of the stomach has a lot to do with our spiritual health. Why? Because the physical and the moral nature share similar feelings and sensations. Are these words just ideas that I made up? Or might they be something that God wants us to understand and accept? God wants his children to be healthy. It was written in 3 John chapter 1, verse 2, where it said, "Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospers." Now, if God thinks it is important, some may wonder whether modern science has said anything about it. Yes, it has. In fact, this concept is well known and accepted by scientists. They call it the brain-gut connection. Some of you may not be aware that we all have what some scientists call a second brain in our gut, and that both brains, the brain in your head and the brain in your gut, are very well connected with each other. In a publication by Johns Hopkins Medicine titled "The Brain-Gut Connection," talks about the enteric nervous system and the research they have done. They have found that both brains regularly communicate with each other. What they have found is a revolutionizing medicine's understanding of the links between digestion, health, mood, and even the way you think. The brain talking to the stomach is very interesting, don't you think? And this is something that was discovered only recently. But once again, we see that science confirms and verifies what God revealed to his people over 100 years ago. So from Ministry of Healing, page 306, the stomach is closely related to the brain. And when the stomach is diseased, the nerve power is called from the brain to the aid of the weakened digestive organs. About time modern science catch up. Well, at this time, most of us have good food readily available. We need to strive to live on fresh food, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, grains, and seeds. And don't forget fresh, golden, delicious apples. These will not only improve your health and strength, but will save money. Produce is one of the least expensive items you can buy at the supermarket. While we're on this, let me mention that to avoid losing nutrients, vegetables should be cooked for a short amount of time. The cook needs to use imagination and care to prepare food that will not only be healthful, but appetizing as well. But first, let's look at the type of food we eat, then the amount of food we eat, then the time we eat it, and lastly, the way we eat it. So let's get started. Again, we're going to look at the type of food we eat, then the amount of food we eat, then the time we eat it, and lastly, the way we eat it. We will begin with type of food we eat. We need to be very careful with the type of food we eat. You and I know that not everything sold in a supermarket is healthy and nourishing. For example, many spend a great deal of money to purchase the so-called vegetarian foods to replace the meat in their diet. Unfortunately, if you read the list of ingredients, most of those food items contain so many additives and preservatives that they end up being more harmful than even the meat from animals. Other individuals pay more to obtain items labeled organic. Is that necessary? Let's be balanced. Get the best, the healthiest food you can find within the limits of your budget. Hold on. Should I repeat that one more time? Get the best, the healthiest food you can find within the limits of your budget. Then, when you're ready to eat it, remember the dream I had about the farmer? Then, when you're ready to eat it, ask God to bless it. Ask that God will not only bless the food, but also remove any harmful chemicals and restore the needed nutrients that may be missing. Remember, He is the Creator. Speaking about balance, some cultures rely greatly on the use of oil and butter. Some of their favorite meals, their most popular and traditional foods, are based on generous amounts of fat and oil. They not only use a bit of oil to make a salad dressing, but also use it in their cooking. You know, when oils are heated, when they are used in cooking and especially frying, science has shown that their chemical composition changes. That food item is no longer healthy or even safe to eat. Understand this. Heated oils release hazardous substances that harm the body's cells. Science calls them free radicals, which contribute to the development of many diseases, including cancer. It is interesting to note that in the Israelite economy, God said that all the fat was to be burned at the altar because it was His. Why was that rule made? Because God knew that the fats in meat would destroy the health of His people, and He wants His children to enjoy good health. Now, I'm going to mention a very touchy item, sweets. Just that word makes you lick your lips. Think of the holiday meals and desserts that people plan for Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, Easter, and so on. Think about the sweets and desserts planned for birthdays. Think about all the candy and sweets that are purchased for just Halloween. Now, having a simple dessert for a special occasion, like next week for Thanksgiving Day, is not a sin. But I know some people who want something sweet every single day. Just think about it. Doesn't the thought of a golden, delicious apple pie sound wonderful next week for Thanksgiving? So what is wrong with sugar? Well, the dentist would say that sugar can bring on cavities. Why? Well, did you know that your teeth have tiny tubes? They are called dentinal tubulars, and they bring in nutrients and fluids and sensations from the outside of the tooth to the inside. So, what is the role of sugar? Sugar plugs up the tubulars, preventing the nutrients from getting into the teeth. No wonder the starving teeth get sick from cavities. Think of the results and consequences of the food we eat. Think about the results from consuming sugary things like chocolate, soft drinks, snacks, cookies, candies, gummies, cotton candy, ice cream, cakes, pies, and the various types of desserts, the things that abound, especially during the holidays. The people that feast on these will suffer the consequences because most types of desserts destroy health. Well, what was it that Ellen White wrote that is so interesting? Well, from Fundamentals of Education, page 227, we can read, the desserts which take so much time to prepare are many of them detrimental to health. I dwell upon this as essential. In writing about the combination of milk and sugar, as in many desserts, Ellen White wrote this: milk and sugar clog the system, irritate the digestive organs, and affect the brain. Anything that hinders the active motion of the living machinery affects the brain very different directly. And from the light given me, sugar, when largely used, is more injurious than meat. That was taken from Counsels on Diets and Food, page 328. It's time to go on to the next point. Remember, we had 4 different points. So now the next point is the amount of food we eat. You know, there's a tendency to pile the plate high with food, especially when people go out to eat. You know, like buffets. Even when it is good food, the amount or the variety of items cause distress to the body that many do not realize. When the stomach is under stress, the brain is harmed and becomes confused. God says that it makes people stubborn. Stubbornness and confusion make it much more difficult to detect the advances and temptations of Satan. And that is an easy way the enemy uses to stunt the spiritual growth and prevent God's people from developing a holy character. Well, you remember the statement that Addie read from Counsels on Diets and Foods. You got to take that home with you. But you know, I've seen this happen at potlucks. And not just church potlucks, but I've seen it when families get together. Often, several people will bring something special. The result is a table loaded down with delicious looking things to eat. And it often happens that people eat more than their body can readily handle. Well, have you ever wondered why so many people fall asleep on Sabbath afternoon? Now, I'm not talking about those who work long hours all week long, and when Sabbath comes, they are completely exhausted. I'm not talking about that. I'm referring to those who enjoy Sabbath lunch so much that they eat more than they should. Others want to taste everything. so they add to their plate a little of all the available options. In both cases, the result is the same, a foggy brain. But listen to how God told Ellen White to describe it. This comes from Review and Herald, July 19, 1870. This is a long time ago. Ellen White wrote, "If the stomach is burdened with too much food, even of a simple character, the brain force is called to the aid of the digestive organs. There is a benumbed sensation experienced upon the brain. There is an impossibility of keeping the eyes open. The brain is almost paralyzed in consequence of the amount of food taken into the stomach." Spalding Megan Collection, page 259, spells it out really well. Stop eating before you feel entirely satisfied. The stomach is the most abused organ in the whole body. The simpler the food eaten and the fewer kinds, the easier is the stomach's work. There was a recent internet post put it this way: don't fill your stomach. Less is more when it comes to eating for long life. According to the 80% rule, in order to stay healthier longer, instead of stuffing ourselves, we should eat a little less than our hunger demands. Did you catch that? Even people who have no clue of the precious information God has sent you and me are saying that we should stop eating before we are full. You know, as they say in the product infomercials, they go, but wait, there's more. Well, are any of you sad, gloomy, depressed? Well, listen to what Ellen White wrote to a woman suffering from depression. This can be found in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, page 318. The brain is closely connected with the stomach, and its power has so often been called to aid the weakened digestive organs that it is weakened, depressed, congested. While in this state your mind is gloomy, naturally dwelling upon the dark side. All right, we've done 2 points so far. It's time to move on to the third one. This is going to be difficult. So let's go on to the next point, and it is called the time we eat. Well, for starters, this topic is going to be a real deal breaker because it goes completely against a lot of cultures. What about the time we eat our meals? Well, you know, there's a saying that goes, eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. You know, I remember several years ago, I had a personal dream for someone. It was for a lady who suffered with indigestion and abdominal pains. She could not sleep well at night. She had stomach cramps because of all the eating late at night. She did not sleep well. Her diet was problemcated. In other words, her diet was all wrong. She overate for each meal. But the worst was that she ate her biggest and heaviest meal late at night. I told her that her message also involved timing. Her last meal was to be a light fruit meal. And if she was not finished eating by 6 p.m., she was to eat nothing else until breakfast. She could drink water, but nothing else after 6 p.m. Well, before we move on to the next point, remember what I just mentioned, that it is a cultural thing, and that I was directed, the instructions that I was to give this woman, which is true for all, that at 6 o'clock, the dining room closes. The mouth closes for anything except water at 6 p.m. In a little bit, I'm going to share more Spirit of Prophecy statements that many, if not all, will go, oh, wow. So we just finished point 3. Let's go on to point 4. Let's go on to the last point. In what way do we eat? So in what way or how should God's people eat? All right, let's begin with an appeal to mothers. But in order to prepare to live in the Eden made new, this is what Ellen White wrote. We must regulate the manner of our living, dispense with animal food, and use grains, vegetables, and fruits as articles of food. Now, in a minute, I'm going to mention how some are told to eat a special diet, and that some of the things that we read for all do not apply to all. And I will go over that in a minute. But to hear this one more time, in order to prepare to live in the Eden made new, the new earth, Ellen White wrote and recorded in Appeals to Mothers, we must regulate the manner of our living, dispense with animal food, and use grains, vegetables, and fruits as articles of food. You know, some people think that men cannot live on fruits, grains, and vegetables because they need more substance in their diet. They will say, I understand that we should eat fruits and vegetables, but not the men. The men need to have beef with its iron. They need a lot of food. They need a big heaping plate of food to sustain them because they work hard and need much more substance. Really? I'll say this again with a question mark. Really? Okay. All of you that are listening, whether this is live on the phone right now, or if you're listening to this in a recording, those of you listening, make a fist. Come on, I'm being serious. No, seriously, hold out your hand and make a fist. Now look at your fist. Guess what? Your fist, that is the size of your stomach. Yes, your stomach swells and stretches, but that is why so many people have digestive problems. You know, many people burp a lot and pass a lot of gas. We're talking about those individuals who burp, or those who have musical sounds coming from their butts. We won't discuss how the odor changes. God told Ellen White that at bountiful tables, men often eat much more than can be easily digested. The result is a dullness of the brain. The mind does not act quickly because the blood is contaminated and the brain confused. Serious injury is thus done to the delicate digestive organs. The excessive amount of food eaten, or the improper combination does its injurious, harmful work. Disease takes the place of health. And if you want to read that for yourself, it is from Counsels on Diet and Foods, pages 139 and 140. Well, did you notice that men often eat too much? Ellen White mentions board meetings that should have been peaceful and productive, where the decisions made should have been clear and unanimous, but instead arguments flared up and disagreements destroyed all productivity. And why did that happen? Because the men had eaten too much and or too many different things at the same meal. So listen to what Ellen White wrote in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 7, page 257. The habit of overeating or eating too many kinds of food at one meal frequently causes dyspepsia. What is dyspepsia? In addition to telling us that it means indigestion, Merriam-Webster uses other descriptive words: easily irritated, disagreeable, cranky, grouchy, and downright ornery. Do you know people like this? In many cases, the reason and cause is what they eat. I'm sharing a lot of spirit of prophecy statements today because we have to listen. It's messages that we were given. So listen to this one. This is from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 7, page 257. The brain is affected by the condition of the stomach. A disordered stomach creates a diseased condition of the brain, and often makes one obstinate or stubborn in maintaining erroneous or wrong opinions. By intemperance in eating, you disqualify yourself from seeing clearly the difference between sacred and common fire, and you also reveal your disregard for the warnings that the Lord has given you. Now let's take a few moments to mention the function of time in our eating. I'll say it this way. Your stomach needs time to accomplish three things. The first is digest or process the food that we eat, to renew its supply of gastric juices, and rest. Now, I'm sure you know the stomach is a muscle, and it contracts and relaxes in order to break down food. So, do your muscles get tired after doing some kind of physical activity, after working? Do you need sleep to recharge your energy level? The muscle in your stomach gets tired too. It needs time to produce gastric juices to digest your next meal. That is why breakfast is the time to have our heartiest meal. The stomach needs time and rest between meals. Why don't we hear God's instructions? Remember I told you we're going to not go by what Ernie says, but we're going to hear what God showed Ellen White to write. So here are 4 very important facts. The first one, these are 4 examples given in the Spirit of Prophecy. The first, from Ministry of Healing, page 304. At least 5 or 6 hours should intervene between the meals. All right, stop with the first one. What should be the biggest, the most important meal where you eat the most the whole day? Breakfast. After you finish breakfast, then you're going to find out that nothing goes in that mouth unless it's water for 5 to 6 hours before the next meal. So again, the first one from Ministry of Healing. Ellen White was instructed to write, at least 5 or 6 hours should intervene between your first meal and your second meal. Let's go to the second one. The second is from Counsels for the Church, page 223. Not a particle of food should be introduced into the stomach till the next meal. All right, let's think about the first and the second. You wake up in the morning after sleeping all night. You have your kingly meal. Remember, the first meal begins as a king. The second meal is a prince. And the last meal is a pauper. Very little. So in the morning, you eat breakfast like a king. That's your big meal. But now until lunchtime, if you eat lunch, you have to let 5 to 6 hours pass. And Ellen White said that not a particle of food, nothing except water, should be introduced into the stomach until your next meal. Let's move on to the third one. This comes from Counsels on Diets and Food. If, and it says if a third meal, we're talking supper, dinner, we're talking that time before 6 p.m. If a third meal be eaten at all, it should be light and several hours before going to bed. Well, for those that like to eat at 9 o'clock at night, well, time to get on your knees because you are violating God's instructions. 6 o'clock is and should be the cutoff time. Again, the third from Counsels on Diets and Food. If a third meal, and that meal that you take before 6 o'clock is the pauper meal, one that is made up of very little, very light. If a third meal be eaten at all, it should be light and several hours before going to bed. Here comes the big deal cruncher. This is the last one. This is the fourth one. From Counsels on Diets and Foods, page 173. The habit of eating a small breakfast and a large dinner is wrong. How are you going to deal Judgment Day when God says to you, why were you eating so much late at supper? And why did you skip breakfast and not eat anything at all? Why did you reverse things? So just remember, the dream I had for the woman actually applies to everyone. 6 p.m. is a cutoff for ending your day of eating. 6 o'clock is the last time anything food-wise except water enters into your stomach. Now, the exception would be, of course, if you are on medicines prescribed by a doctor to help you with some ailment, which is most likely because of a diet problem. But if you remember that 6 p.m. is a cutoff for eating anything, if in your sinful, sick position right now, you have to take some kind of medication, that is excluded from the instructions. But if you live the right way and eat the right way, then you're probably going to get well. And I'm going to share something special about that. So why don't we read those 4 statements one more time? Listen carefully. Number 1, at least 5 or 6 hours should intervene between the meals. Number 2, not a particle of food should be introduced into the stomach till the next meal. And then number 3, if a third meal be eaten at all, it should be light and several hours before going to bed. The habit of eating a small breakfast and a large dinner is wrong. We also need to think about the amount of money spent on food items to gratify the appetite. Are all those foods healthful, or are they really harming your health? The harm may not be immediately apparent, but the body weakens a little with each abuse until it finally breaks down and you get sick. Think about the money spent on things advertised as organic. Is it food grown in your garden where there are no chemicals? Were the seeds genetically modified? What is the source of the seeds? Sad to say, nowadays, some items labeled as organic are not free from pesticides because the rules for labeling a product as organic have been changed. So a recent article posted in the Mayo Clinic's website begins by stating, discover the difference between organic foods and their traditionally grown counterparts when it comes to nutrition, safety, and price. Now, this article can be found under Googling organic foods, are they safe, more nutritious, from the Mayo Clinic. If you don't want to write that down right now, it's a lot to it. Just email us, and you know how to get in touch with us on our website. Email us, and we will email you the link, because the article mentions that even items labeled as organic have quite a bit of pesticide residue. Remember we said earlier, buy what you can afford. Then when you get ready to eat it, like the farmer told me, did you thank God for the golden delicious apple? Thank God for the food you're about to get, and then ask him to bless it and to make it pure so that your body can get what it needs from it. This day and age, it is hard for families. But when I was growing up, we all lived on my father's income. My mom was at home caring for all of the children as it should be. Mothers are to make sure that the children are brought up the way they are supposed to be, according to God's guidelines spelled out in the book, Child Guidance. But now, when the dad returned home from work, he should have the respect of his children as it's supposed to be. But when it was time to go shopping, the mother and father would discuss what was to be purchased. Back then, when the children, we would go along, and when we would see a bag of candy or a box of Cracker Jacks, we would get a unified no spoken by the mommy and daddy. Instead, they'd reach down and get some type of fruit or vegetable, even if it was canned. This was for the welfare of the children, my family. But nowadays, both parents have to work to bring in money. But instead of focusing the attention on the best use of the funds they are getting in, many are spending more than what they have coming in. They are living beyond their means. It's a sad fact that some families go into debt because they want nice things. Many choose to buy items that they don't really need, things that they really could live without. They get things that are fancier or more pleasant or more comfortable when something simpler would be sufficient. To illustrate this is a story that I had forgotten about. This is from many, many, many years ago. It's a story from the South Pacific. Some of the little islands down there in the South Pacific. It's a story about a father of a little family in the South Pacific that had a little boat, and he used it to go to another island where he worked. Well, the family decided that it was too much effort for him to row over every morning and then row back each evening. Now, I need to tell you that the family was not rich. Each month they had barely enough money to pay for the place they had, buy food, and care for the family. Nevertheless, the family decided to buy a brand new motorized powerboat so that Daddy could comfortably zoom to work in the morning and zoom back in the evening. They decided that they did not want to invest in good used motorboat. Why purchase a used boat when a new one would be so much nicer and more comfortable? A big new boat would let the entire family enjoy traveling in style. But soon, when the boat was only a few weeks old, they realized that the boat payments absorbed most of the money the father earned. In fact, just buying food and other necessary items became a real struggle. The family's pricey purchase turned out to be a crushing burden that made their lives more difficult than they were before they got their fancy boat. Clearly, we need to think about this and how much of our income is spent on food. Are you spending the proper amount of money on food? Are you keeping a good balance on your budget? What you buy and what you spend money on. Remember to economize in everything except the nourishing foods that our bodies need to sustain life and health. Now, I want to stop here for a minute. I want to stop here for a minute and share something very personal and yet a very important bit of information. I want to talk about someone we call Caper. I want to share a little bit about Caper. Now, she's listening right now, and I told her that I was going to be mentioning her in my sermon. A lot of you know who Caper is, but for the rest, you may be wondering, who is Caper? Well, first of all, Caper is not her real name, but the name her grandson called her since babyhood. He has always called her Caper. Well, I want it publicly known. Caper, this lady, who should not be alive today, she was supposed to have died. She was supposed to have died from a heart attack. But instead, today, she is healthy. Some of you who know her, you know her story. First of all, she's not a young lady. She is actually a senior citizen. She was also very overweight. She had great difficulty just walking from a chair to the bathroom. Even walking from the car to the house was exhausting. She started having chest pains and was unable to walk very far without feeling weak and out of breath. She was taken to the hospital, and after many different tests, the cardiologist told her she was in really bad shape. She had severe issues with her heart. Some of her arteries were clogged, and Caper needed immediate bypass surgery. Well, wouldn't you know it, I had a dream with a message for Caper. In the message, I told her that she was to change her diet and only eat fresh fruits and vegetables. She was told to cut out the oils, the canola oil, the vegetable oil, the corn oil, the coconut oil, the olive oil. She was to cut out salt and sugar. Yet she was also to avoid extremes, maintain always a balance. She was told to enjoy a piece of cake on her birthday or a treat on other special occasions. But for the most part, Caper was to eat a diet as mentioned. Along with her diet, she was to begin to walk slowly and move around. Recently, Caper, who should have died a long time ago, went in for her yearly checkup. Well, she has no need for any surgery. She has excellent blood pressure. Her heart functions perfectly once again. Again, she has no need of any heart surgery. And will make it clear, she never had any kind of surgical procedure at all. She has a healthy heart, a heart healed by God. Now she is healthier by far. Don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but she is way healthier than some of you listening right now, no matter your age. And I'm talking even the young people. And I can tell you as an eyewitness, I can attest that she can outrun most of the, notice I said outrun. I didn't say outwalk. She can outrun most of the young people listening right now. She has to run because she keeps up with her grandson as a walk and run. Now I want to say that she has lost a great deal of weight. Even her face has changed. She is a testament to living the way that God directed. But as they say, but wait, there's more. Her new diet has done other things to her body. For many years, Caper suffered with rheumatoid arthritis. Her hands, her wrists, they would swell and be very painful. But now, Caper, no longer does she have any arthritic pain. There's no swelling. And now Caper enjoys full function of her arms and hands. If you could only see her outside, running around or hand washing her car with her grandson. Here is someone who listened to what God wants, who listened to the words of God and let the Holy Spirit walk, or in her case, run with her. Now, the same woman goes and walks an hour every day. How many of you can do that? Oh, yeah. Caper had to spend a lot of money. You see, she had to buy new clothes. The large clothes she used to wear were huge and baggy on her now small, petite frame. One can only give glory to God for her example. Let's talk about food combinations and mixtures. If we took the different dishes that are put on the table at one meal and mix them together in a large pot, would it be something appetizing? I mean, just imagine all those different dishes at a potluck and putting them all together and mixing it up. You wouldn't want to eat it. Well, what if we let that mixture sit for a couple hours? Half mixed food, or think of it this way, half chewed food with all the condiments, ketchup, mustard, this oil, that oil, whatever you can think of. What about all the desserts? Oh, wait, wash it down with coffee or carbonated drink. You can be sure that mixture will ferment. And we expect that stomach to receive all that and make good food blood out of it? We are counseled to avoid eating fruits and vegetables at the same meal. Why? Well, because both together will produce acidity, and your mind will not be clear and able to function well. We need to learn to reason from cause to effect. Here's what Ellen White was instructed to write. It's taken from Signs of the Times, September 30, 1897. Ellen White was instructed to write, vegetables and fruit should not be eaten at the same time. And at one meal, use bread and fruit. At the next meal, bread and vegetables. Thus, we may have all the variety that we need to desire. And if we must have puddings and custards, let bread and these articles form the meal. The richness of food and complicated mixtures of food destroy health. Now, let me clarify something important. Eating simply does not mean having a meager diet. It is right to provide a good variety of fruits and vegetables. And it's important to avoid overripe fruit and wilted vegetables because they will not provide good nourishment and may even bring in bacteria. So, why does God recommend eating this way? There's a very good reason. Because God, the one who created our bodies, knows what the body needs. In the dream, A Great Work, the herald presented a very interesting illustration of why we need to control what we eat. Instead of high-octane fuel, the owner of an expensive sports car put sugar, coffee, hamburgers, and other inappropriate items into the car's fuel tank. Then he added a bunch of vitamin supplements. Is it any wonder that instead of running smoothly, the car sputtered, jerked, and coughed? The herald showed that the man took his expensive sports car to the mechanic to have it worked on. Did you pay attention to the symbols? When humans, designed and created to consume fresh fruits, vegetables, grains, and nuts, abuse their bodies with things that do not belong, many try to make things better by adding vitamins and supplements. Improper eating may even require a visit to the doctor, hoping for help to repair the damage that you caused to yourself. Again, lots of spirit of prophecy. We need it. Counsels on Diet and Foods, page 110. Disturbance is created by improper combinations of food. Fermentation sets in, the blood is contaminated, and the brain becomes confused. Do you remember what happened to Hophni and Phinehas when they presented common fire? And do you remember why they presented the wrong type of fire, disregarding the clear instructions from God? It was the result of something they had put into their mouths. Now we know that it is not only drinking beer or wine that impair the brain. By improper eating, you can get drunk and be unable to discern, much less obey, God's instructions. Therefore, we need to remember that we destroy our health when we eat rich food and or when we eat a variety of different items in the same meal. Load up that plate. And what happens to our brain when we do that? We virtually shut God out. Remember the 40-day fast that Jesus endured in the wilderness? Here's a most important lesson. He wants us to learn from what he endured. I want you to ask yourself, are you ready? Satan is focused on separating you from God. His goal is to blot out, that means erase, from humans every trace of God's character. And he is constantly finding ways to weaken and degrade our mental and moral powers. Why? Because then we cannot appreciate heavenly things. Listen to this. It's from God's Amazing Grace, page 342. Indulgence of appetite and passion clouds the mind, lessens physical strength, weakens moral power. Our only hope of regaining Eden is through the firm denial of appetite and passion. With intense interest, God and heavenly angels mark the self-denial, the self-sacrifice, and the agonizing efforts of those who engage to run the Christian race. To all those who fully comply with the conditions in God's word, the race is not uncertain. They all may gain the prize. You know, athletes strive to perform their best, absolute best, in order to win a competition. They are very careful how they treat their bodies. They work hard to be in the very best condition just to get applause and a prize. What about us? What about you, who hope to be approved of heaven and receive the prize of immortal life? Shouldn't we be willing to deny our appetite for unhealthy stimulants and indulgences to win heaven's prize? From Counsels on Diets and Food, page 111, reread the following statement. Listen carefully. If men and women would only remember how greatly they afflict the soul when they afflict the stomach, and how deeply Christ is dishonored when the stomach is abused, they would be brave and self-denying, giving the stomach opportunity to recover its healthy action. While sitting at the table, we may do medical missionary work by eating and drinking to the glory of God. There are two important points in the quote I just read. First, did you realize that we dishonor Jesus when we do not treat the stomach correctly? And the second, did you catch that last part? Several of you have commented that you would like to help this ministry by doing medical missionary work. Did you notice what Ellen White said about that? You may do medical missionary work just by eating and drinking to the glory of God. Many pray for God to help them get ready for translation, but they do not do their part. God is perfect. Everything he does is perfect. His plans and purposes are perfect. And he wants us to be perfect in our sphere as he is perfect in his. Instead of weakening and harming the body he has given us, the more closely we follow his instructions, the more we will be like him. This is one way obedience leads to perfection. Do not be intimidated and discouraged by difficulties and assaults of Satan. Be of good cheer. Jesus said in John 16:33, I have overcome the world. Every promise in the Bible is for us to claim. As David wrote in Psalms 119:11, Thy word have I hid in mine heart, that I might not sin against thee. Now I need to stop here and address, as they say, the other side of the coin. First, we are never, I want to say that again, we are never to point out the diet of another individual. This message is directly for the one who is listening. I paused again because I want to read this again. First, we are never to point out the diet of another individual. This message is for you. For you who are listening to this message right now. We cannot know what another individual may have been instructed. Some may have been instructed through testing of the spirits, as they say, to eat a diet most would quickly die from. What if someone is instructed by God to eat lobster, shrimp, crab, along with beef and chicken, but not to eat fish? No one should never question or speak about what another individual eats. At least you have not been instructed to have the diet of Ezekiel. The diet he had to follow for 390 days. You realize 390 days, that's a year and about a month. But then again, let me throw you another thought. I want you to think about this. After Jesus was crucified, after he was raised back to life, after he returned to heaven with the first fruits, after he met with the Father, after he returned to the earth, after the walk to Emmaus, what did he do? He went to the upper room. He broke bread, and he ate a meal with his disciples. And in that meal, in his glorified body, think about this, the body that was raised back from the dead, the same body that went to heaven, went into a closed door, had a closed one-on-one meeting with God the Father in his glorified body. When he returned and he had that meal, what did he eat? He ate fish. Makes you want to go, Well, as I close this message today, let's think of the bigger picture. So why are we talking about diet and money? God gave messages to Ellen White to help those who would be alive at the very end. Those messages were given especially to help those who would experience the horror of the what is coming. God sent those messages to strengthen the minds and bodies of those who would have to endure the worst times this planet has ever seen. As we look around, we observe unmistakable signs of destruction. Every day, the Weather Channel presents more devastating evidence. There's talk about a 1 in 1,000 years flooding and an unprecedented number of tornadoes, even in places that are not supposed to have them. There's mention of windstorms and amazing amounts of rainfall that have fallen in a very short period of time. We hear about forest fires that go on for months, earthquakes in places where maps do not show fault lines. And what about the relationship between nations? Do you hear of wars and rumors of wars? Hello? Is anybody listening? Is anybody paying attention to these things? Remember, I started off talking about the rain that we're having here in Northern California. And I look at it that God is crying tremendously. He is crying because of what he has to do. Well, for those who have been wondering, we get so many emails in that says, when's the next dream coming? Why have we not heard anything since the last dream posted called 2020 Years Seen Clearly? It's been, 5 years now? Why is God so quiet? Well, for those who have been wondering, I am quickly working on the next major dream that is to be posted on the website. Yes, it will be the first posted dream 5 years ago, 2020, Year Seen Clearly. Well, in this new dream, I'm instructed to post it after the first of the year. I have a lot of work to do. This dream speaks of the many things that have been evidenced over the past years and months. It speaks of the many fires, earthquakes, tornadoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, volcanoes, flooding, excessive heat and excessive cold, the great amount of snow in the higher elevations. In this new dream, I am told that all the things that have been experienced, all that has been seen, and all that has been reported are only examples of a sampling of samples. All the destructions and deaths are just samples of what is to come. I want you to wrap your mind around this. Since the dream 2020, I have been constantly giving dreams that are write down, which I have been preparing, and it is just stored, unread, not shared. But all the things over the past 5 years, I want you to think about the last 5 years. All the fires, all the earthquakes, all the tornadoes, all the tsunamis, all the hurricanes, all the volcanoes, all the flooding, all the excessive heat and excessive cold, all of the great amount of snow in the higher elevations. Understand that I was told that all these things that we have experienced that I just mentioned, for some, all the things that have been seen, all these things that have been reported, I am told that these are nothing more than little itty bitty examples of sampling of samples. All the destruction, all the deaths are just little itty bitty samples of what is to come. I'm going to let you think about that for just a moment. These are just little itty bitty samples of what is to come. Earlier I said God sent messages to strengthen the minds and bodies of those who would have to endure the worst time this planet has ever seen. Ellen White said she shuddered to think how horrible and disgusting life will become. People won't be able to buy anything. They won't have food. Forget about selling your unwanted things to get money. Remember that buying and selling will not be possible for those who do not have the card. A lot of what Ellen White talked about, it's already come to pass. In some countries, items that we consider basic necessities are only for the privileged class. but are very limited for most people. But we have it easy here in the United States. It's so easy to go out and buy potato chips, bags of candy, ice cream, even all kinds of so-called health food. Got to stop here again. Here's an interesting side comment. Did you know we're finding out most of the vegetarian food? You know, Worthington, Loma Linda, Morning Star. You people get these, oh, I don't eat meat. I'm using these foods. I get to, this is Worthington this is Loma Linda this, oh, and this is Morning Star. Well, these are available now, is extremely unhealthy. Those items are full of preservatives, artificial ingredients, MSG, and so on. If you got a can of some of this stuff, pick up and read the ingredients. Even though these items have no animal ingredients, many vegetarians are suffering due to the effects of the additives and preservatives they contain. We should be getting ready. None of these things I have mentioned should be new to us. It was 17 years ago, back in 2007. God showed us his plan in the dream, a great work. Not going to read it now. Don't have time. But when this meeting is over and you hang up, go find it. Back in 2007, a great work. I really do. I invite you to take time to reread and review that message. But I want you to listen carefully. There will be very few alive at the end. God, in his infinite knowledge, knows that most of you listening to this message right now will probably not make it through to the end. Yeah, I need to repeat this. There will be very few alive at the end. God, in his infinite knowledge, knows that most of you listening to this message right now will probably not make it through to the end. You remember I spoke a bit ago about caper? Well, if you're having trouble walking, difficulty remembering, if you have joint problems, somewhat problems seeing, somewhat problems hearing, sleeping problems, then God may bless you with letting you take a little nap. Then while you're napping, the young ones are going to finish things up. But what about the young ones? This message is also for them. Are they being taught these things? Are you preparing them as to how and what they are to learn? Those who have children sitting and listening, I'm talking to you, parents who have your children sitting right there. Those of you who are sitting with your children, listen. Look at them. Look at your children and mentally ask yourself, have you prepared your children for what is about to happen? I just mentioned all these things. I mentioned just a little bit ago about all these things that would be coming. The fires, the earthquakes, the tornadoes, the tsunamis, the hurricanes, the volcanoes, the flooding, the excessive heat and excessive cold, the great amount of snow in the higher elevations. That all of these things that we have seen, all of these destructions, these are nothing more than little samplings of samples. So, again, God in his infinite knowledge knows that most of you listening to this message right now will probably not make it through to the end. And I said, those of you who have children sitting and listening, look at them and mentally ask yourself whether you have prepared your children for what is about to happen. Let's say that something suddenly happens and they had to run out the door and flee for their lives. How far could they run? Remember, I said Caper's in better physical shape at her senior age than probably most of the younger children are right now. What physical shape are they in? Well, sad to say, but sometimes the truth hurts, and each would rather follow their own self-inspired aspirations. So let's bring up one last time what I shared when I started off, when Ellen White said, and this, again, Addie read this, and this will be the fourth time I've shared it. This is from Counsels on Diets and Food, page 59. Think about this again. The controlling power of appetite will prove the ruin of thousands. When, if they had conquered on this point, they would have had moral power to gain the victory over every other temptation of Satan. But those who are slaves to appetite will fail in perfecting Christian character. And as we near the close of time, Satan's temptation to indulge appetite will be more powerful and more difficult to overcome. This is for them, but also for you. Because if you have a young one, you should be focusing on what Ellen White said. If it seems too hard, if you don't want to do it, you might as well join the people that don't believe in Ellen White. Remember, I told you I'm going to share a lot of statements from Spirit of Prophecy. I was going to share a lot of Ellen White. This is the definition of self-denial, saying no to what we want and yes to what God says. As Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 9:27, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be cast away. This is what makes us a peculiar people. This is why we're different. Being peculiar does not mean walk around naked. Being peculiar means reading about, listening to, and following what a prophet has written and saying, this is what I have to do, then doing it.